In the game of Dungeons and Dragons, there are a lot of different types of damage, and we're going to talk about the different types of damage and why you, as a game master, need to understand what they are and how you can use them in your own game. Hey fellow Game Masters, I'm Richard QUINER, and welcome back to the Daily D20, your daily dose of all things tabletop role-playing games, helping you build your world and master your game. And today, as I said, we're talking about types of damage in combat in Dungeons and Dragons. In the world of Dungeons and Dragons, there are many different types of damage, and the reason you want to know all of them and what they are is because it deals with resistances and vulnerabilities that players may have. Some characters, some races, have different resistances to certain types of damage, and some creatures and monsters and races have vulnerabilities to certain types of damage. So for you to understand the types of damage and what they are, it can help you run the game a little better and deal the proper amount of damage to your players and your creatures that you're running as a GM. Now, when I talk about resistance, that means the creature takes half the damage from that specific type of damage. So if a creature is resistant to fire damage and they take, for example, 10 points of fire damage, that means the resistance will take that in half, making 5 points of fire damage. If the creature is vulnerable to fire damage, that means they take double the damage. So if they're dealt 10 points of fire damage, that means that will be doubled to 20 points of fire damage. This comes into play a lot when dealing with different types of races that might have different resistances, and so you as the GM need to know what these are so you can deal with this more effectively. And it's good to understand the types of damage because sometimes you might just get confused as to what type of damage a certain weapon or certain spell might do, because it's not always the most intuitive, as we'll find out a little bit later on. First up is acid. Acid damage is a corrosive type damage that is dealt by something eating away or dissolving an object from the outside in. There is a very well-known spell called the Acid Splash that deals this type of corrosive acid damage. Bludgeoning damage is a very well-known common form of damage that is basically blunt force objects hitting something very hard. Usually this is dealt by maces or flails or quarterstaff, something that doesn't have a sharp edge but just hits really hard, deals bludgeoning damage. Cold damage is basically the effects of freezing temperatures on a body or on a person. This is usually dealt with spells or breath weapons. If you're a dragonborn that deals cold damage as their breath weapon, this comes into play with you. Or if you use a spell such as the Ray of Frost, you're going to be dealing cold damage. The exact opposite of cold damage is fire damage. This is caused by extreme high temperatures having the effect on the creature or object, and these are also generally dealt by breath weapons or spells, such as Burning Hands is a common spell that uses fire to create fire damage, or Fireball or Firebolt. There's so many different spells that deal fire damage. Force damage is a type of damage that is dealt by magical energies. Most common is the magic missile deals force damage as it strikes its target. This is kind of a catch-all for spells. If it doesn't have a specific elemental type, it oftentimes will deal force damage. Lightning damage is another elemental style damage that deals electrical shock energy into a person. If you've seen a lightning bolt in your life, which most people probably have, you know that they can do a lot of damage in the right moments, and lightning damage is just like that. It's basically getting hit by a lightning bolt. Necrotic damage is one that is often associated with necromancers or death or decay or rotting. It's a type of magic that is withering and decaying and kind of sucking the life out of things. That is necrotic damage. Some common spells that deal necrotic damage are things like Chill Touch, which that's one that you would think it deals cold damage, but it's actually necrotic damage, and the Vampiric Touch, which sucks the life out of creatures. Piercing damage is another weapon type damage that is dealt through impaling or puncturing a creature or person. It is usually dealt by spears or daggers, something that is more of a sharp stab, not so much a slash or a thump. Poison damage is a type of toxic kind of a gas or a venom, usually caused by venomous creatures or poisonous breath weapons, or even some spells that might confer poison onto a creature. Or for assassins, sometimes they can poison their blade and deal poison damage to a creature. Usually this is done on top of another type of damage. In the case of an assassin, you will deal piercing damage, and then on top of that we'll add extra poison damage because the blade is poisoned. Psychic damage is a type of damage that is dealt to the mind, usually dealt through telepathy or some sort of mental spell that kind of casts anguish on the person. You could also think of it as just feeling really disappointed in yourself so much that it hurts. This type of damage is often caused by spells such as Psionic Blast, or for bards, they can use Dissonant Whisper to cause mental psychic damage to a creature. Radiant damage is another type of damage that I say you need to understand so you don't get confused, because a lot of the spells that deal radiant damage say the word flame or fire in it, and that's not what it means. Radiant damage is the holy damage from righteous vengeance struck upon an object or creature. It's not exactly fire damage, so when you use it in a rule context, a radiant spell will not necessarily burn something with physical fire. It's just a different type of burning that would happen. That's why I said before, you need to understand the difference. This is where the most confusion happens. When you see a spell named Sacred Flame, Sacred Flame deals radiant damage to a creature and isn't actually flame, but sometimes a player might read that and think, oh, this is a fire spell, I'm going to use that. So this is where you really want to understand what the different damage is so you can use that and explain that to your players and understand that for your games. Slashing damage is damage that comes from bladed objects such as swords or axes. It's more of a slicing maneuver, or claws. Some creatures have claws that do slashing damage. So it is different than piercing and bludgeoning in the type of damage that is dealt. There is a specific type of damage for different weapons. And the last on our list is thunder damage, not to be confused with lightning damage, because we all know thunder and lightning are two very different things. Lightning is the electrical shock that comes from it. Thunder is the sound. In this case, thunder damage is usually a concussive blast, kind of caused mainly by spells that might ripple through the air and use kind of a sound wave to damage people. That is thunder damage. So now that you know the different types of damage, you can use these in your game. You can know what your players are resistant to, what they're vulnerable against, what the creatures are resistant or vulnerable to, and you can use those in your game more effectively, understanding the different types of damage. If you like this video, I invite you to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos just like this every day. And of course, fellow Game Masters, I've been Richard QUINER. Thank you for watching.